Welcome back to the Turn the Music podcast. This is episode 14, and I know what you're thinking. Episode 14? What are we doing at episode 14? I thought 13 was the end. Well, it's not. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And there are a couple other changes that we wanted to talk about. And before I do that, I have to, of course, introduce my co-host.
Give me a C, give me a J.
That's hysterical.
Call him Chris anyway. Why did it change his freaking name? I think it's really lame, but who cares? Here he is, CJ.
That's really funny. I'm so glad that you played yours instead of mine because I don't have mine.
I had a feeling you wouldn't have one, so I just came up with my own.
Yeah.
Again.
It's been really busy and I just didn't get it. But I have like a couple ideas in mind, so I'm just going to have to like knock them out and have them ready.
And that was the problem with this one. This one, like I've had this in my mind for like a month. And I couldn't figure out the words. And finally, last week I sat down with like the rhyming dictionary online. I'm like, all right, I'm figuring out the lyrics, and we're gonna get this thing done. And it actually took me longer to come up with the words than actually the recording. I did 2 takes on the piano, 2 takes on the vocals, and I was done. I was like, all right, cool.
That's hysterical. That was good. That was funny.
Oh, thanks.
I like it. I like it.
So yeah, CJ is here, and we're continuing with our running jokes of intros because why not?
Why not?
So let's address the recording situation. So just to give you guys kind of an idea of what we've been doing, we got about 7 or 8 weeks ahead in terms of our recording. And one of the things that we're noticing is that there's a lot of stuff that's happening like every day, and like there are new releases. And I kind of want to talk about some of the new releases. Like, for example, today, Shaggy came out with a new album. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Shaggy's new album. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't.
So Shaggy came out with a new album today. He is covering Frank Sinatra songs, and it's produced by Sting.
So we should acknowledge the fact that when you listen to this episode,
Yes, this will be 7 weeks old.
yeah.
But what we want to do is when these things happen, we want to be a little bit closer to the actual release date. So now that we have 7 episodes ahead, we're going to start waiting to do our recordings and do our recordings kind of more in live, within a week of the release date. So we were building them up because we weren't sure how long the editing process was going to take and how our schedule is going to, work out. So yeah, that's the first change. So that's going to be a fun change. What else are we changing up?
Well, I think.
Do you remember?
No, so the other thing that we're going to change up is what we're doing. I think, we were kind of like doing interview, artist spotlight, and I think that we're just going to kind of go with the flow and see what happens. If we pull up an interview, it's going to be an interview. If we don't, we don't know if we're going to label them as artist spotlights because it's also going to be a matter of what we're talking about that week. If something happened that week or prior to us talking, and we're hoping that doing it this way we can engage our listeners a little bit more because we do have engagement, which is awesome. We would like to get even better engagement. So the conversation,
the engagement, and this goes back to the first thing, is our engagement is 7 weeks after we recorded. So, our brains are 7 weeks ahead of everyone, and trying to keep those dates straight is difficult. So
we.
It's going to be a little bit different with the editing process, but that's all on our end. So you guys don't care about that, but.
Yeah, and I don't think there's much. I don't think outside of there's much. I think we're just having so much fun, and we got to that 7th episode thinking we were halfway, and we're like, no, we're not. We're not halfway. We're just enjoying this too much, and we're gonna take this. We don't know how many episodes it's gonna be. If
it'll probably be in this 20-ish range, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to put a number on it because we've already done that and blown right through it. So,
and if we just keep going, we just keep going. You never know. So we appreciate you to all that have been hanging out, who's been listening to it, who, the day that it comes out or a few days later, those that join in the middle, you can always go back and listen to those first episodes if you like. You don't have to, even though we may reference them, we still kind of give you a little bit of
Yeah,
background.
I don't think that you need to, start from the beginning.
Exactly.
I mean, we'd love for you to start from the beginning because there's a lot of, I think, really cool stuff in there. But yeah.
So that's awesome. So keep listening, keep and see what craziness occurs as we move forward.
Yep.
I
And just so you know, we've been promised several introductions from CJ. So now I'm up to 3. So
I gotta catch up.
You got to catch up.
So I have to do 3 introductions. Okay. So the side note to this, it's kind of like race car drivers where they make that joke where race car drivers make a complaint about everything and why it didn't work out. I'm not trying to make a complaint. What I'm trying to do is, you play piano, I don't. I play saxophone, so I'm trying to figure out the best way to kind of give a little background instrumental to it,
Right.
Without me having to clunk away at the keyboard poorly. So
I'm willing to play for you.
No. It needs to be a little surprise to it.
Okay.
No, there's got to be so. But so don't worry, things will come. So the next episode, we will definitely have something, and
No. You will have something.
I said me. Yeah, I'll definitely.
No, you said we is what you said.
I did say we. Tried to slide that in there, but it didn't work. So we'll definitely do that.
Cool.
I do want to correct one thing before I forget. We were talking about in episode 12. We talked about the Castrati singer, and we're not going to get into what a Castrati singer is, but it was back in the day. This was something that he did. I think we put some reference in there, but we mentioned about I mentioned about a singer that made it into the 19th century and was recorded. Now, at that moment, I was not thinking properly.
Are you ever thinking properly?
No, I'm not ever thinking properly. So I'm acknowledging right now that I wasn't at that moment. But he lived into the 20th century, so the early 1900s, which is when we were able to do any type of recording in the early 1900s. So they were able to record the last Castrati singer in the early 1900s. We're not going to play the video. I mean, we could if we really wanted to. Do we want to play it? Because I do have the...
if you want to play it. If not, we can just link it.
All right, so you know what? We won't play it. If you're interested, go take a listen. There is a YouTube link that we'll put in the show notes, and you can take a listen to what we mean by a Castrati singer. There's a lot of information on it. They became these very popular singers, so there's a big history to it, and I don't know if it's an episode that would be interesting unless you're really into operatic classical. Something maybe we could talk about in the future when we talk more about singing.
Yeah.
So just
so you don't have to correct yourself again, there were recordings in the 1860s. Just saying.
That's a fair point. That's a very good point. I guess because I'm thinking of his age at the time that he was he was singing. Right. They were recording. Oh, yeah, that's right. Or 1860s, right? Nope. Yep. See, I'm okay with saying that I got the wrong dates. I'm totally fine with that, and I make mistakes. So that's why we say if you hear something and you know the correct information, or we slipped and said something wrong, please tell us, because we do want to correct ourselves. Yep. Cool.
So what are you listening today to this week, last 2 weeks, whatever?
I stayed on our acapella kick.
Oh, did you?
For a little bit? Yeah, I was listening to Rockapella, who the last one of the episodes we ended off with Shambhala, which I think was part 2 of our acapella. Was it part 1? Yeah, it was part 2.
1, I think.
Huh? Part 1? Oh, whatever.
I think it was part 1 because that was when we talked more about Rockapella.
Right.
So I started at the end.
Part 1. So that album, Smilin', is a very summery, springy album for me. So I like to listen to that. It's one of those albums that I, drop the windows down, even though it's acapella, it still sounds great and all that stuff. Yeah. They have a couple of like barbershop feel songs in it. So, and it's cool because it was the transition of the Barry Carl and Sean Altman into the new people that are taking over. So it was, I like that album a lot. And then I just kind of let it play. Like after that album plays, Apple Music will just kind of find songs that kind of relate or match up to it. So a few groups came up, like home free comes out. You know, every time I hear home free, I think like home fries. That's just the fat kid in me, and I use that I use that term with love. I don't say it in a bad way. Just I think of home fries.
You know what I really miss about Long Island? Northport Deli had the Hungry Man. It's like 4 eggs, sausage, bacon, home fries, hash brown, all in like a foot long. I miss that.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't know if I could ship that to you. I don't know if it would make it.
No, I don't think
it wouldn't make it to the packaging. I would eat it before you got there.
No.
So
it wouldn't make it out of the parking lot.
And then little opera.
Okay.
Little opera. So when being that we know that we're 7 weeks out, we're recording on what would have been my grandfather's birthday.
Oh, wow.
So around this time, I tend to listen to opera music, and I'll probably do it again around July, which was when he passed, just because he was such a big music influence. He was important in my life. Father figure, that type of thing. So all my grandparents were fantastic. I just, the bonds that you build with them. And so I was listening to some opera like Pavarotti, certain arias that my grandfather loved to sing. So I loved listening to them. And also because my grandfather used to tell me stories about working with Pavarotti at the Met. So it was just cool to kind of listen to that. And didn't do any heavy metal this time. I normally sneak in a little heavy metal.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I lied. Never mind. Definitely played the Mongolian group.
Oh, nice.
Shared it out with a couple people. I think I scared a couple people. So
do you have any recordings of your grandfather?
Yes, I do. I have to. Almost a year ago we moved, and we've been kind of like getting the house that we're in situated, and it's still packed. I need to pick that up. I have a few. I actually have one where we sang together. We sang The Impossible Dream.
Nice.
Yeah, we
Awesome.
There was an opportunity. I don't remember if I was still going to the school. This was for the high school. They were doing something, and we were asked to sing, and he was asked to sing, and he said no, him and I should sing, and we did The Impossible Dream, and we kind of just split the parts a little bit. So it was very cool. So I think I have that as well. So I'm looking, but let's talk about recordings real quick, because I think this will lead into some of the discussion we'll have.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? I'll bring this up after. What have you been listening to?
So, a couple weeks ago, I had a very bizarre text get sent to me, and it was one where I had to make kind of an awkward decision. And I don't want to get into a lot of it. I'll tell you off air, but
my eyebrow just went up.
It was weird. It was it was a weird situation, and I was asked to go to a meeting and then make a decision about something. And when I got the text, I had made up my mind, and I went, all right, I'm done. And then I said, you know what? I need to kind of listen to someone who's a lot smarter than me. So I went home, I did a little Googling, and I Googled Victor Wooten and wisdom. And I came up with
because you didn't text me. You didn't reach out to me.
No, I didn't text you. No, because I needed someone smarter than you. So I came up with a podcast that he did an interview on, and he was telling a story about how Chick Corea called him up and said, "Hey, I want you to play upright bass for my 75th birthday party."
Interesting.
And he's like, "Well, I don't play upright bass," and he goes, "I don't care. That's what I want you to play. It's my birthday." So anyway, he gets into the show and he starts playing. He gets to the part where he's soloing, and he's really struggling going through this soloing stuff. He's just all in his head. And then, the show's over. He watches the video afterwards. And what he realized was the entire time he was soloing, Chick was playing backup for him. But at the same time, he was feeding him solo ideas. And because Victor wasn't listening, he wasn't able to get those ideas and solo off of them, and he wasn't having that conversation. And I went,
interesting.
All right, I need to have a conversation and not just walk in. And I did, and I changed my mind, and it was a good thing that I listened, because had I not, things would have turned out poorly, I think. So because of that, I've been listening to a lot of Victor Wooten.
I snuck
went back
I
to-
snuck him in too because you brought him up in a text message, and I snuck him in a
Yeah.
little bit too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went back to his Yin Yang album.
Great album.
And then his live album. And then I have a bootleg copy of a concert that he played up in Rochester with Stanley Clark.
Oh, nice.
One of my favorite, it's him, his brother Joseph, Reggie, and Dorico Watson on the drums. But that's what I've been listening to a lot of. And his new album, of course, which you brought up, the song Cupid in a text message, that we need to talk about the song Cupid.
Yes, there was this. Oh my God, that just and
every time I listen to that song, I cry.
well, so when we talk about it, at the time of this recording, this is when we had a lot of the. I'm going to bring it up because I'm not. This a lot we've had. Mm-hmm. This was the school shooting in Texas. The shooting in California at the church, and a week prior the Buffalo shooting. So when we talk about this song, and we can talk about it in a bit, it hits you. It just hits you hard. So we'll talk about that. So
yeah, definitely.
So you've been doing a lot of Victor Wooten. Anybody else? A
lot of Victor. That's really it. A little bit of Jacob Collier too, because I really do want to do a Jacob Collier episode, and it's going to be a rough one to get through, I think, because of the stuff that he does. So I'm trying to kind of pick this song. I mean, I think his stuff is very listenable. Although Nick, who we talked to a few weeks ago, he disagrees that it's not listenable at all. But
and I think he comes up soon. Nick, his
next week.
Next week, right?
He goes live. May 31st.
So next week, in the sense that you would have heard him by the time you got here, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I've been listening to Jacob Collier and trying to figure out how to talk about what he does and how he does it in an episode and have people understand, because it's very weird, some of the stuff he does.
I think he's going to be a two-parter, but I think he's a two-parter in the sense that we're going to introduce him, and then we need to kind of bring other artists that we can kind of bring in with him.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in a sense with him, you could bring in Victor Wooten and talk about that. And I think that's what we made. That's, it'll be an intense two-parter, but I think it'll be an exciting two-parter. Like, I don't think it's going to, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
So after the 2 weeks there, I kind of started thinking about, and this was kind of, so we really didn't have a plan going into this episode, because this is kind of like another little interlude that we had before, give you kind of update on where the podcast is and where it's going. So one of the things that I thought would be kind of neat, since, I spent so much time thinking about Victor, is talking about our teachers, mentors, and, people that have affected us, whether it be music or just, life lessons. I think, we need to give them kind of a shout out and just a thank you publicly, because I know for me, like, I've gotten a lot from them, and they need to have that recognition, I think. So that was kind of the idea behind the episode for tonight. So.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's something that once we kind of put it out there, I think it's something we're going to share throughout the future episodes, because it's just going to come back to us.
Yep.
So just before we get into that, I wanted to share, so as you know, Kyle and I, we met in college. Kyle started a year after I did. And at the end of his second year, at the end of my second year, the end of Kyle's first year, we did a choral invitational that was, I think it was spread out through Long Island. It was a bunch of high schools that came in and sang with us as a group. And then we did a bunch of different songs. I know Carmina Burana was on that and all that stuff. And it was we were huge. It was a huge group of people on stage. I remember this because I have a funny story I'll share. I don't know if you remember this, but I was going through some boxes, and I knew that there were CDs in the box that I was going through, and one of the
What's a CD?
Oh my goodness! So
I stream all my stuff.
I found a compact disc, but I found a CD, and it was the recording of the choral invitational. So I have yet had the opportunity to rip it onto my computer, meaning taking the files and put it. I'm just joking. Rip it onto my computer. So once I do that, maybe that's something we can share a little. Little of.
Yeah, definitely.
And it was just really funny because it brings back those memories of doing this. The funny thing is, I don't know if you knew this or ever heard about this. So we needed risers from different high schools, and there was a day where I forget which school it was somewhere in Nassau, because we were at Post, so it wasn't that far from Post. And I remember speaking to the lady in our production manager in the office, and she's like, "We need to go pick up risers." I was like, "Okay." She goes, "Have you ever driven a box truck before?" I'm like, "No, but I'll figure it out." So we go all the way down to, I think it was the sports center, and it was like a 14 or 15 foot or longer box truck. And she's like, "We need to take this and go get the risers from the thing." Driving a box truck, if you're careful, you can make it work. I'm comfortable in most cars, so I really never felt so. We get in because she didn't drive, we got in, backed it out, drove, no problem, not a big deal. We get to the school, and the where we needed to go to get the risers was through this parking lot. But the problem was there were cars parked on both sides, and there was a narrow space. And there was no way we were going to roll these risers down this parking lot into the truck. So here I am, backing up a 15-foot box truck. First time ever, because I definitely didn't drive one prior to that. Backing up this 15-foot into this parking lot with cars on both sides. And I'm not talking about like inexpensive cars. I'm talking about some very expensive cars. And I'm backing up, and there's a curve. Like I get to the middle, I have to curve the truck. I have to get right up to the garage. And we go back and we do this a couple, and then we drop them off. Like she was like, "How did you do that?" I even got like some random award while we were in tour in Italy. It was like, "And to Chris for being able to drive a box truck for the first time ever, picking up." But like, that's like funny to me because I didn't remember that until I picked up the CD. I was like, "Oh my God, this is what I did this."
What's funny is I remember driving a box truck with you at some point. I don't think it was that year.
Oh, that's right.
It might have been that year. I don't know what year it was, but I remember because I was working at the hardware store at the time, and I would drive the 15-footers and 24-footers all the time. I was like, whatever, I don't care. Right. I had trailers behind me, whatever. I was picking them up and driving them all over. So I don't remember where we went.
Maybe we were dropping the risers off. It's very possible.
We might have been.
We might have been dropping the risers off. Anyway, so like it's just so. You brought teachers up, and and we've spoken about this before about how music impacts you in such a way that it brings back memories. So you may not know it at that time, but you go and listen to a song, you pick up a CD or whatever, or a program or whatever, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I forgot I did this. Oh my God, I forgot I sang this song." Or, "Oh, the experiences during this is awesome." So I say lead into teachers. Do you have someone you want to start off with? Where do you want to?
I do. And this is kind of it's kind of a neat story because it kind of almost leads into what you were just talking about. So, my very first music teacher in elementary school, her name was Sonia Paget. I ended up actually working with her son. Came in as a student teacher when I was in high school, so it was really kind of interesting to work with her and then him. But the very last church I worked with in New York before I moved out to Ohio was Northport Presbyterian Church, which is the church that she attended. And she remembered me. And it was really neat because while I was at that church, I mainly sang in the choir, but as the organist and the choir director went on vacation, I'd fill in for them. So she remembered that I was, learning the piano at the time. So it was really it was neat to be able to, after 30 years, be like, I started piano, when I was with you, and then here I am 30 years ago professionally playing in your church right before I moved to Ohio and started a new chapter of my life. It was a neat little kind of bookend to that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So she was the first music teacher I had. I honestly don't remember much of anything. I remember she was very, very tall, and she wasn't as tall as I remembered her but yeah, and her and Virginia Thomas was my first piano teacher, and between the two of them, really kind of solidified my love for music in the beginning. Unfortunately, Mrs. Thomas is no longer with us. But I remember taking lessons with her forever. So yeah, those two, I mean, I wouldn't be here without the foundation from those two.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yep.
For me, the love for music has always been there because of my grandfather. Both my, so a little quick, my mother's parents, my grandfather was the opera singer. My grandmother, I found out at some point, did some belly dancing and stuff like that. And she did sing. She wouldn't, she didn't call herself a professional singer, but she sang in the choirs and whatever, church stuff. My grandfather, my father's side, he played violin. My grandmother on my father's side, I don't know if she loved music. I just don't know, like, if she ever partaked in the sense of playing. I don't think she did. But that doesn't mean she didn't sing. I don't, but there was always a little something musical with everybody in the family.
Yeah.
But my grandfather, the one whose birthday was today, was, being his, his discussions about singing and being a part of the Met Opera Chorus, his story he got there later in life. He was like 35 years old when he got in. It wasn't one of those things where he was around 35, maybe a little bit younger, but and funny story, there's like a height thing. He always had to wear shoes with lifts to make sure that he was the same height, because they tried to keep everybody the same height. I mean, it even goes as far as, like, there was a book out, 100 Met Operas or whatever the title was, and he's on the front cover. You could picture him, you could see him right on the front cover of the book. Yeah. And so influence came from inside the family, inside the home. It wasn't until I sang in different things when I was younger. Like 5th grade, we put on a play, and I remember singing in that and whatever. And then I played saxophone. I started in 4th, went through. My one of my teachers in middle school, Mr. John Pinto, and I don't know if he's still with us. I wish I knew. I don't know. He was phenomenal. He was a saxophone. He was a violinist. He played a few instruments, but he was phenomenal. Like, made me want to play more in the group because he made it fun. He made it interesting, and he balanced out the discipline and the fun. Like, he did a very good job doing that. And we had some really, I was very lucky that we had some really great teachers in our district. But it wasn't until I got into high school, that, like, I wasn't in the chorus. Ironically, I didn't get into the chorus until 10th grade.
Right.
In 9th grade, I was asked to. I wanted to be in plays. I wanted to go and stuff. This was about the time my parents were starting to get divorced and stuff. So it was just kind of like a nice outlet. And I auditioned, for the musical. And I think I may have shared this story, but quickly, like, I was beaten out by 2 other guys, which I expected. Like, it wasn't like I was 9th grade. These guys were juniors, seniors. Like, that's how that goes, and that's cool. And unfortunately, they had to pull out like 2 weeks before, and myself and a friend of mine had to learn all those lyrics, all those songs, choreographed dance moves in 2 weeks. And it was fun. It was cool. And, it was a great time, and the cast was fantastic. It made me feel comfortable and all that cool stuff. And so the choral teacher, Miss Nancy Pinto, yes, she was the ex-wife of the middle school teacher, also fantastic person, was like, why aren't you in chorus? That type of thing. And I was like, I don't know. and she influenced me to go in. And then, not to bring up another teacher, but, and then you knew him, Mr. Larry Sobel, or knew of him, right? He who passed a few years ago. I miss Nancy Pinto. I don't know. I haven't heard anything, but
right.
Mr. Sobel, Mr. Larry Sobel passed a few years ago, and he was a huge influence too. Like, he was hard on you, but he was hard on you because he saw your potential, not because he was giving you a hard time. It's because he wanted to get the best out of you. And it took me a while to realize that, especially because at the time, my parents going through a divorce, I was kind of like so close to everything that's going on. And then he's like that, and then him and my grandfather met, and he got involved with the music, and my mom got involved, and it was very cool because a lot of things started to come together, and it's amazing how impactful that is,
Yeah.
like. So how did you know? I forgot. How did you know Larry Sobel?
So when I was working at Cornet Music, Larry came in. He was working with Buffet at the time.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
The clarinet company, and Buffet would send him like instruments to test, and he would give them approval and then send them back to France and all this sort of stuff. So we did a lot of work with Larry, and he came to the store for us. And he would cherry pick all of the really good Buffet stuff and make sure that we sold it in our store.
This was after he retired from teaching. Larry Sobel was a ridiculous clarinet player.
Yeah,
like
really well known.
Oh my god!
I mean, if you're a clarinet player, you know what the quality of the Buffet clarinets. Like Buffet wanted him to test them because he was that good.
And if you were a reed player or a woodwind player, I should say, reed double, whatever, you knew him or you knew of him, and all that stuff. So that's cool. You knew him after I knew him, which is very cool too.
Yes,
I mean I kept in touch with him, and to college and everything like that. But
I knew the name growing up, but I didn't meet him until Cornet.
Right, and
which was 2008 maybe.
Yeah.
2009,
but that just shows you the impact of him as a musician and as an individual. I mean, you couldn't miss the guy. You couldn't miss the guy. I mean, he smelled the cigars. You couldn't miss him. He had the greatest beard, the greatest look. He had the little ponytail, and like I said, meeting him, you may think he was just difficult to be with, but like you could sit with him and have the best conversations, and he was so down to earth, so chill.
Yeah, we would when he came into the store, we would just talk for hours.
Yeah, and he was that type of person. Like, and he loved talking. He loved talking about it. Yeah, that's amazing. So you had your two initial teachers.
Yep.
And then I'll go back to one in a second, but to share your go from there.
The next I'll give you two other ones. So the other one, I forget why and how all this happened, but I switched piano teachers for a little while. My mom's very good friend Happy Erickson started teaching at St. Paul's and the school that my mom was working at.
Say his name again.
Happy Erickson.
Why do I know that name?
Oh, because I think you've met her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I totally did. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Now that clicked. Okay.
Yeah. So she was the music teacher at St. Paul's. Yes. And I, for whatever reason, we switched from Mrs. Thomas over to her for a while, and then we switched back and forth. I don't remember why, but we did. And she was another great influence. And the neat story about that is I ended up working with her at that school. And then when she was like out sick and stuff, I would cover for her, like her music classes and stuff and rehearsals. And then the next one is when I was in middle school, Don Sherman was our band director, and he encouraged me and several other of the folks in the band to form a brass quintet. So it was me and four of the guys. We had two trumpets, a trombone, a tuba, and I played French horn. We formed a brass quintet when we were in 7th grade. We played like nursing homes and churches, and we did NYSMA competitions. But it was just really cool to have, he was a euphonium player, and then ended up directing the Northport Community Band in the park for the summer stuff. Took over for Bob Kruger, and he was just a love of music from him. And I ended up working with his wife. His wife was a librarian at the school that I taught at. And she's a phenomenal flautist. In fact, the last church I worked with that I was mentioning before, the Northport Presbyterian, they heard of her and Debbie Jenks, who was the organist, and James Galway actually came and played for them, played flute because he was just so impressed with their music at that church. Sure. I unfortunately wasn't there at the time. I missed that all, but so Don Sherman and Happy Erickson are the next two that really kind of help propel what Sonia Paget and Regina Thomas started, that, just kind of took that foundation that they did and that love and helped propel it forward. That's when I hit high school, where I met Sandy Valerio, who was the foundation for my choral love. And I mean, he is the reason that college was a lot easier than it should have been, because of the training that I got from him and how to perform and what it means to not just sing what's on the page, but to sing the meaning behind the piece and how to dissect a piece and how to teach a piece. And, I would not be able to do what I do today without him. He was an Eastman graduate, actually went to Eastman for trumpet, and then heard Larry Fleming's Lutheran chorus and switched to doing choirs. But he was a jazz major originally, a jazz trumpet major, and switched to playing piano and all, and he was just, what a ridiculous pianist he was.
Yeah.
He was unbelievable.
That's amazing.
Just watching him like read a full score and condensing it into, a piano accompaniment on the fly, like blew my mind. Him and Walter Schneider, who unfortunately has passed. He was my music theory teacher in high school, and he was the one that was doing harmonic dictation. But he was a Manhattan School graduate, and just a brilliant guy. And he's very eccentric. I remember one day, he had like those desks that have like the chairs that have the desk built in. He took one of those and put it on top of his teacher's desk and then taught sitting on top of the desk in that chair. Because why not? It's just the way he was,
That's
and
too
he'd come
funny.
up with, little things like brown cow now and these little like bizarre phrases that he would just kind of blurt out every once in a while. But I remember at my senior year, he sight read, because he was a ridiculous sight reader. He sight read part of Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto, and he was a ponytail guy. And I was like, listen, if you're going to sight read, you got to take the ponytail out. You have to have your hair down and flowing. And he did. He just, and it was unbelievable. I had me, my buddy Will, and Steve sat in on that, and he sight read like 4 or 5 pages just because he could, and it was ridiculously good.
That's amazing.
So,
that's very cool.
Yeah. Yep.
It's very cool. You talked about private teachers. Most of my vocal teachers were in college. I really didn't have anybody within high school. Like I said, I was more of a late bloomer when it came to the music.
Mm-hmm.
Like I played saxophone, but I didn't really do it. When I got into high school, Mr. Larry Sobel, saw potential in me that I didn't see when it came to playing saxophone, but he encouraged me to take lessons with Joseph Impastato.
Okay.
So there was, back in the day, a Joseph Pastor orchestra, which was basically a wedding band. And I found this out in the first few lessons that this was the gentleman that I was working with. Now, the one thing I loved about him was when I told him that I was a singer as well, he incorporated my singing ability into my saxophone playing, which is why I tend to lean more towards, even though there's not really classical music for saxophone, it's a lot of transposed music for saxophone, but there's nothing written specifically for it. Right. But I would take a lot of that and I'd be playing a lot more classical pieces on saxophone. And he encouraged the breath control through the way I was saying. He would teach me that if I have the phrasing of the music, like he'd have me look at the phrasing of the music and take my breath as if I was going to sing it. Like this, it was just very cool. And it made me change my love for saxophone. Like I picked it up because I thought it was a cool instrument to play, and I knew how to play it. But like it wasn't until high school that when working with him, I was kind of like, okay, no, I like playing this horn, and I need to get better at it. So the really cool story, and this is all music related, I found out that he was Joseph Pastor Orchestra, and he gave me an old 45 he had that he used. Old 45 is a record for those people who don't know. And actually it was a 45. And it was his promotional record that he used. It had like 1 or 2 songs in it of the Joseph Pastor Orchestra, and he gave it to me. I probably still have it. So I go home and I'm like, oh, Ma, listen, Joseph Pastor Orchestra. And she goes, that's the group that played at my wedding. So
Wow.
my mom and my dad's wedding, that's what played at the group. And I was like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah, we had Joseph Pastor Orchestra play. And, you know, I told him about it. I said he goes, I don't know how much he remembered. I don't know if he said this because he's just a gentleman and this is the type of person he was. But he's like, I remember the wedding and stuff like that. So to note that, my grandfather, her father, sang at the wedding. He recalled that. So it had to be him because how do you recall something like that? He was, he's talking about that. So I had my grandfather come with me one time. I'm like, take a ride with me. Come to my lesson because the guy lived in Huntington, and I would go. So as I was able to drive, because I started before I was able to drive, my grandfather was like, yeah, come. And they were, and it was just, it's amazing how small of a world music can be because it's so great because it's such a global thing.
Yeah.
Now, I say global thing. I don't know if you have more teachers to share, but I say global thing, and I feel like that leads us into Cupid.
I do have more people to share, though.
Let's share more people. No, please share more people.
So I only two, and one of them is Victor. So we can get into Victor in a second. So
I have like two, and I've spoken about them before, but that's about it.
Do you want to talk to them before I get to?
Because yours were going to lead into Cupid, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all right, real quick, and it really is really quick. So when I get into college, I, being new to singing in the sense that I never took lessons. Like I sang in chorus. I was in theater. I was in all that stuff. And the only lessons that I really had were a few, maybe with the people in the district. So when I got into college, I was looking for a teacher, and breathing for me has always been an issue because I had a deviated septum, and I couldn't take in the breath I wanted to the way I wanted to. So I said to them, I wanted someone fairly physical in the sense that they were going to work my breath control. Right. And that's when I was introduced to Barbara Fusco. So I worked with she was an alto. I worked with an she was an alto.
Yeah, I think she was an alto.
She was an alto. So I worked with her for like 2 years, and it was the greatest experience because instead of working on my voice, we worked on my breath control and breathing and taking in the breath. I don't know if you ever took any of the Alexander technique courses where I took those. Those were phenomenal too because it helped you with posture and all that stuff.
Yep.
And after the 2 years, she felt that she couldn't take my voice further, which at first I kind of took in a negative way. I'm like, you don't want to work with me anymore? Like that type of thing. But then I understood what she was saying. And I moved on to Mr. Thomas Goodhart, which we've spoken about before. Yep. And he just took my voice to another level. And I was very thankful at that time, realizing that she really pushed me in the right direction. And he worked on my falsetto, as we've spoken before. And he made sure that all worked, all that connected, how to hit my lower notes better, because I'm a very dark tenor. So even though I am a tenor, I still sound very deep in the voice in a sense. I guess that's the best way to explain it. So I miss that. I miss that. And I know you brought up Ron Mixell before, and his name has come up.
I'm about to bring him up again.
Please do, because his name has come up so many times, and I'm very tempted to give him a phone call.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ron Mixell, or Mixell, I think is how he pronounces it. So Ethan, his son, I met him in high school. He was a senior when I was a freshman. And I think we mentioned that my high school had an a cappella group called the Multicolored Ties. Ethan was the bass for the Multicolored Ties when I was in high school. And so I met Ethan then, and like I said, the choir there was a special group. You know, they always kind of embraced the new members, and because they knew that it was, if they didn't embrace it, they wouldn't grow, and they wouldn't, the whole chain would just kind of end with new people. So they really embraced the new folks quite well. So Ron came in so we would do clinics every summer for 2 weeks. And we'd bring in guest clinicians, and Ron was always one that we brought in because he was 5 minutes down the road, and his vocal technique is just unbelievably good. And I started studying with Ron when I was in college. So I went to CB Post with you, and I was so I don't know if you had this, but they stuck me because my SAT scores were quite low. they stuck me in kind of like a probationary thing where they restricted my credits, so I couldn't take lessons as much as I wanted to, and because being music, there were a lot of courses that we had to take that were like 1 and 2 credits, and no credits and all this sort of stuff. So trying to fit stuff into my schedule was really difficult. So I didn't have a chance to really study with a lot of people. And because piano was my main instrument and I was getting a scholarship for French horn, I had to take lessons on those 2 instruments, and I couldn't fit in voice on top of that. And so anyway, I did study with Tom Goodhart for a semester before I left. But when I went to college, when I transferred out to Concordia, they didn't really have a lot of voice teachers, and they didn't have a lot of room in their schedule because they were all professional musicians. That we didn't have a voice faculty. It's a very small college.
Right.
So I said, hey, I have a voice teacher. Here are his credentials. Can I study with him? And they went, sure. I went, okay, cool. So I got credit for studying with him.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which was really awesome. And leading into, Victor, if you've read the book, The Music Lesson, which I think we need to do
that book
at least a season on, because there's just so much great stuff. He talks about his teacher, Michael. Ron was my Michael before I knew who Michael was,
That's cool.
He was teaching me the stuff that Michael was teaching. It's not it's not teaching you how to sing, but how to realize how to sing. He would guide you in the right direction. Because if you discover, it's like that whole thing. Like if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for the rest of his life. And it was the same thing there, where it was like he wouldn't tell me the technique, but he would lead me in the direction to discover it for myself. Because I'm different than you, and he's different.
Right,
everyone's
right.
voice is subtly different, and if you learn how to do it yourself, there is a much better chance you're going to remember it. And I started taking that lesson to my students. And I stopped, I was very big on, when I was teaching piano, like how to release your thumb and, get a loose wrist and all this. And I started to back away from that and have them just sort of guide them by using other, figuring out how to do it, doing what he did with the voice, with piano and with trumpet and French horn. And at that point, I went from having like 5 or 6 students to having like 40. So much of my teaching career, much of my choral background, aside from Sandy's, teachings, really stems from Ron's technique, and learning how to do that. And he was the first person to introduce me to meditation. And I mean, truly he was Michael, and is it a coincidence that his last name is Michael? You look at these things that people say are coincidence, and are they coincidences, or did you really, did you lead yourself there
Right.
on purpose?
Right.
But not
Laws of
realize it?
attraction. Laws of attraction.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
just like learning a technique or teaching technique. I'm going to use teaching technique. He taught you in such a way that you taught yourself.
yeah, he taught me how to discover my own voice is what he did.
Right. So you were able to take that technique and translate it to other instruments.
Yep.
So how amazing is that you learn a technique from a vocalist? So the first instrument, in a sense, right?
Yep.
The first instrument. I'm sure, if we were able to find a way that they had instruments, I'm sure there was something out there. But in the sense of like sound, the way we produce, he was able to take a technique, teach you without really teaching you, in a sense.
Yep.
You figured it out, and then you were able to take that and apply it to everything else. How brilliant is that?
Yeah.
And I love that. And you probably could apply it to a lot of things. Painting.
Yep.
Drawing.
Yep.
Writing.
Sure.
I'm sure if you looked at it and said, okay, I could do this and I could do this. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So
and that leads me to Victor, who is, I've had the pleasure of meeting him several times.
Yeah.
So
Don't rub it in.
I'm sorry.
Don't rub it in.
He gave me a hug. The first time I saw him was at the Iridium. Actually, that's not true. I saw him with Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. The first time I saw him as a solo act was at the Iridium in New York City. And I got there early because I wanted to take pictures, and I called ahead and make sure that was okay. And they open the door, and you go downstairs to the venue, and you walk in the door, you turn left, and you go down the stairs. And as soon as I walked in the door, Victor was sitting in a stool, greeting every single person that walked in the door and thanking them for coming to the show.
That's amazing.
Yes. So I went down, and I got. It was one of those places where you get food either before or during the show.
Right.
So I got food before, and JD Blair was playing the drums for him that night, and so JD was setting up his stuff, and I happened to be early enough that I was one of the few people that was there, and JD sat next to me while I was eating, and we started talking. How do you get to involved with Victor, and are you a musician, this sort of stuff. And we sat and we chatted, and it was like, how often do you get to do that with these people? These artists that they just usually come and play, and you go, and then after the show, every single band member, thanked us as we left the venue, and every single time I've seen him since, he has done that. He has welcomed people at the door and thanked them on the way out.
That's just
and
that that reminds me of is what you and Rachel do.
Mm-hmm.
When we spoke to Rachel, I think she was she was our first interview, and you two spoke about how you thank your instruments essentially.
Well, guess where it came from?
Is that where it came from?
Came from Victor.
Really? Does he thank his instruments, or did you take? Oh, he does.
He does. Yep.
He does. Now.
Yep. If you reread the music lesson.
Oh, that's right. Oh my goodness.
It's in the dream chapter where music says, "Don't thank me, thank the tool that you know."
Right.
So I took it from that book.
But he applied it. He applies it to his listeners.
Yep. And the other thing that he talks about in the book is how gratitude is so important. And one of the things that I've learned through meditation is one of the studies that they've done is when you do a gratitude meditation, you basically thank. Well, what they tell you to do is that you basically thank or send good thoughts to the people that you know, then people that you kind of know, then people that you've never met, and then people that you don't like.
Right.
And what they've shown in that with the studies of the brain is that you actually fire new brain connections are made when you do that. So there is something going on during that. I don't know what it is. I don't think we know what it is yet. But the whole idea of gratitude, and that's part of why I wanted to do this, is that being grateful is so important. And I remember I've mentioned that I'm a wrestling fan, or was a wrestling fan. And I remember one of my favorite wrestlers is a guy by the name of Daniel Bryan, or Brian Danielson, depending on what promotion he's working with. And I remember he was forced to retire because he had so many concussions. And I remember his retirement speech. It was all about how grateful he was. It wasn't about, I hate the fact that I can't do what I love anymore. It was, I am grateful that I was able to do this for a career. And it was a short career, but I was able to do this. And he was just so grateful for it, and I think it's something that I don't know that we do enough is just be grateful for what we have.
I kind of agree with you. I think that, not to step in, but just I agree on that end of it. I think that we there's something simple to just saying thank you.
Yeah.
It's not hard to do. It's like being kind. Being kind is so much easier than being angry.
Yep.
And this is opinion. This is not, I'm not an expert in the field. I would never claim to be, but on a personal level, saying thank you, no matter what, is so easy to do. And the fact that you stated, the fact that you pointed out that it goes on levels in meditation to the point where you're saying thank you to those that you dislike, that though they are whomever they are, you still wish the best for them. Yep. You may not talk to them ever. You may not want to have an interaction with them. You may have had a bad situation with them, but no matter what, you still want that person to have a good life. And that's huge. And we've all been hurt. We've all gone through our things. And, I would say myself that over time, maybe you never said it to them personally, but you just want the best for everybody. And despite, even if you were the one who hurt them for whatever whatever the situation was, and I'm sure I've hurt people in the past and whatever the case may be, like, you just want them to know that we just want the best for you. So thank you. So that's cool that I'm glad. And it's amazing how music can do that. And it's amazing how music can do that on the level of hearing and on the level of feeling, because like I've mentioned before, or I may have, my wife being hard of hearing from a deaf family, when we got married, half the people that were there were deaf, and they were still up dancing because they were able to feel the vibrations of the music. I mean, you were there, I mean, you experienced that. I do want to share a little tidbit of how good of a relationship Kyle and I have when it comes to music. And I say this as a it's not like me upset in any way, shape, or form. I sang a song at my wedding to my now wife, "Can You Feel the Love Tonight?" And I know me, and I know how I am, and to everyone else, they were like, "Oh, it sounded so great. It was amazing. Thank you so much." My family was like, "Oh, it sounded great." Go up to Kyle. I'm like, "Kyle, how'd it sound?" And Kyle went to me and he said, "I heard you done better or do better." and it's really funny. You would think that at that moment I'd be like, what are you talking about? But no, I knew you would give me an honest answer.
Yep.
And that to me, like, I said thank you to you because, thank you for being honest, and thank you for telling me straight out, like, I've heard you do better. And you said it was good, but I've heard you do better, so that just goes to that whole entire thing. Like, I was grateful you did that. Like, it solidified in my mind, because in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, that sucked. Because that's just what you do as a musician. If you're, most of the time you're beating yourself up. Yep. So everybody else is going to say it's great, but to have someone that and you trust to give you a proper answer, like, is good.
And I'll tell you this, I wouldn't have been able to say that to a lot of people.
Right.
There are other people that I would have to say, yeah, it was great. Yeah. But I know that you could take it.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate
that.
And
you would appreciate the actual.
Yeah. No.
So
I rather be told that out of anything. I'd rather be told, it was good. You've done better. So no, that's, and the music lesson, you're right. We need to do, whether it's an episode or two on it. Buy the book.
Yes. Buy the book, read it. So I've told people this a lot. I don't read books more than once. I've read the music lesson. I think I'm up to 18 times now.
I got to pick it up again.
Yeah, and I'm about ready to start it again. And then Victor came out with a second book called The Spirit of Music,
which I have.
I just finished that yesterday, 2 days ago, something like that. Not as good as the first, but good. It was a good addition, but it's a different book. It's a different style of writing, I think.
Did you listen to an audiobook of the music lesson?
I did.
It's fantastic.
Yes. Oh,
even,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
Even if you're not a reader where you want to have the book in front of you, get the audiobook version of it, because it did actually, I think it either was nominated or won an award, because it's so well written, and the music in it is amazing too, because it goes so well with what he's talking about. So I think that I need to pick the book up again, reread it. So if you're going to do it, I got to do it. And then we need to plan an episode or two of it. And if you...
Well, I was thinking, what if we do like a book club season where like each week we do a chapter?
Can we do that?
I don't know.
We'll have to look into it. All right, listeners, this is episode 14. We're going to look into this, because if that works, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it would be neat to do, we all as listeners, and, we read a chapter together a week, and then we discuss the chapter the next week.
Do we YouTube it?
We could.
Oh.
We're not going to read the book, and we're just going to talk about the book. So why can't we do that?
All right.
So it's kind of like a book club, on a podcast.
Being that you're such good friends with Victor Wooten, maybe you can get him to put in a few words.
I wish. Yeah. so to finish
continue,
that
yes,
story,
please.
Yeah, to continue. So I took pictures of that show, which was the books over there. So I made a book of the pictures I took, and about 10 years later, he came to Cincinnati, and I was sitting there, and he came the first time. It was at a school. He and his brothers that went to Beaver Creek High School, and they taught the jazz band for a week.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and then they did a concert at the end, and then I was sitting there at the concert, and this lady walks up on stage. I'm like, oh, who's this goofy teacher? Like coming up on stage, like what's going on? And she started singing, and I went, I know that voice. That's Crystal Peters. And she sang at the Iridium. She toured with Victor during that first show. She lives in Cincinnati. I had no idea. And that's where he met her. And then the next show, when I found he was coming back, that was the show he did with Sinbad. Crystal's band opened up for them. And I had the book made, so I was able to give Victor a copy of the book, have him sign it, and have Crystal sign the book because she came and opened up the show. And she's like, oh my God, I've changed so much. Look at that picture of me 10 years ago. Like, she's had like 2 kids since then. And so it was really neat to be able to talk to them about that show that, and then Victor said, listen, I want these pictures. I was like, yeah, take them here. Like I gave him the digital copies, and he's like, I'm going to make books for all these people that were on tour with me that year. And so, yeah.
I love how humbled he is and how he's not, and I mean, it comes across in what he does. I had the pleasure of sitting in a Zoom event, which is an all-day event for music education, and he was the keynote speaker, and he was just so down to earth the way he spoke, and he didn't speak down to you. He didn't speak that he was better than you. He spoke to you as you were just a person standing next to him, and though his knowledge of music is crazy, and his philosophy is amazing, and even his how do you put it? His, he speaks so much in his music. Like, he talks about how, like, there's a song that talks about how, like, no matter how you do it, like, I could wear the shirt this way. I forget that the intro is, but there's a guy speaking, and he just plays, and it plays to the fact that, like, his technique may be a little bit different than the average bass player. And it talks about, it doesn't matter how you do it. It's a matter, we're going to still produce the same thing at the end. So that's cool. I've heard this Victor Wooten story multiple times, and I can listen to it over and over and over again.
Yeah. He's and there's so many great, like, just clips of him playing on YouTube, but there's also great interviews. Of him talking. He gave a commencement speech that is 20 minutes, and it's absolutely brilliant. And I listen to that every once in a while just to get myself centered again, because some of the concepts are so relevant and are still relevant. And one of the things that I keep coming back to, I had someone say to me the other day, like, how come you're such a good person? Like, I don't understand how you've gone through all this in your life and you're still a good person. And it brings me back to something that Victor's mother would always say to him, because Victor was opening up for Curtis Mayfield at the age of 3 or 4 or something like that, and all of his family friends would come up to his mom and say, aren't you so impressed that Victor's doing this, that all your kids are doing this? And she would just look at them and say, what does the world need with another musician? What the world needs are good people.
Right.
And it's like, and I think that's kind of where Cupid comes in,
can I add to that before we go into
Cupid? Yeah, sure.
You bring that up, and I think that's so awesome to hear, because one of the things my grandfather used to tell me as I was going through music, he said, there will always be someone better than you.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's so, no one's ever said that to me before. And he says this to me, someone who's accomplished what he's accomplished, but that just goes to show you that you could always be better. You can always be a better person. You could always be better at what you do and how you stuff. So yes, it's a perfect segue into Cupid, which, my goodness, that song.
Yep.
Please talk about it, because can we get through this?
Let me bring it up.
Bring it up. As you bring it up, I'm gonna just, again, at the beginning we stated how we're recording this around the time that there was multiple shootings, one at an elementary school where I think they're at like 19 kids at the last time we looked were killed, and a bunch of teachers. It was like 4 or 5 teachers, and then the shooting in California, and then the shooting in Buffalo, which we know how it was driven. It was racially driven, and this song played, and I've heard it before, but I didn't really process it, when I first heard the song. And then I listened to it again because there's like a track before that kind of talks about it, and then
there's a vocal introduction
with kids' voices.
Which is what I plan on playing.
Please do. And then the song itself. So, share how you're gonna share. Do it.
Sure. Is anyone working on a bomb that makes people love each other? Well, I believe we already have it. It brings people together, and you don't have to know anything about it to understand it.
It works.
It's a language. It's a lifestyle. It's called music. And it can save the world.
What I love about this is, there's 4 people on this track. I mean, it's Dennis Chambers on the drums, Bob Franceschini on the saxophone and flute, Victor on the bass, and Vairi Joshri, who is from India. Never sat in the studio with them. He basically said, "Here's my album, sing what you want, and send me the vocal tracks." And the fact that we have that sort of around the world kind of feeling in all of this, on top of the meaning behind it, I think is really neat.
I think this is why we didn't want to stop half at episode whatever we were going to originally stop at.
Right.
We're having a lot of fun sharing out music and musicians, and we haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah, I mean, we can. I mean, just Victor alone, like I say, we could do a full season on Victor and all of his. Just his music alone, then his philosophy, then his books, then like there's just so much to cover with him.
Which would take us globally, because he is global with what he does.
Yep.
And then the influence of the song itself, to have that artist in there, I thought it was amazing to have that and there's not much in the sense of lyrics in there. It's just a few words explaining the fact that we just need to be kind to one another, and
I love the way he comes out of that, where it's this fun little bass riff,
right?
It's just this happy, upbeat, and then the saxophone joins in, and then Vairi Joshri joins in. And it's almost like, music can bring us together. And in that moment, in that piece, they all came together, and then they're all singing the same or playing the same thing, the same theme.
Right.
And it's a bizarre instrumentation. It's bass, saxophone, and voice. It's like, that's odd,
right.
But it works.
Right. And that's
which I think is just beautiful.
And it is. It's just it's one of those songs. I mean, he does this with many of his albums. There's at least 1 or 2 songs on there that you just go, what?
Yep.
Like that. He just I don't know what to say to this. Like you just listen to it over and over and over. This was on the
Tripnotics.
He has,
that's his most recent one.
Palm Mystery. He has
that's
I Saw God, which is
God.
gorgeous. It's a great song.
And then I was listening to that on the way home. I listened to it 4 times.
Right,
On the way home
and
today.
yeah, and so you do the same thing I do. You repeat the song over and over and over. And then there's another one on there that I love in Palmistry, but the one that really is poignant.
Miss You.
Yes, Miss You is so good.
Yeah.
And then
maybe we'll play that to close.
Oh
out,
yeah,
'cause
that's fine. And like just all his albums that when you sit there and you listen, he's I don't know. There's like you said, we can go on and on about him.
Yep.
If you have never listened to Victor Wooten before, take an opportunity and just listen to one of his albums, the most recent or even one of his older ones. Just no matter what, you're gonna. I think you're gonna enjoy the music because though he's a bass player, and that's what he does. There's so much more to it, and his bass playing is beautiful.
Yeah. So I mean, there's the Show of Hands, which is it's an album that kind of showcases his style of playing. There's the other, what's the one with the Loneliest Monk on it?
I'm gonna bring up. Hold on.
The name of that album.
I'm gonna bring up because I can't remember the names 100%. So I'm gonna try to be smart.
Sure.
And grab his. So we have.
Yeah.
All right. So surprisingly,
what did he say is the album?
What did he say? Surprisingly, he doesn't have a lot of albums.
No, he doesn't. So and I mean, part of that is because he plays with Bela Fleck. And
right.
You know,
but he starts with What Did He Say was his first album.
Yep.
And then he goes into Vital Tectones, which is the trio.
With Scott Henderson.
Yep.
What's the other guy's name? Steve Smith.
Yep.
Steve Smith and Scott Henderson, I think is.
And then it goes into Yin Yang. I don't think I've listened to Soul Circus yet. Actually, I think that's what I have.
So Yin Yang is Yin Yang is a double CD. It's much more towards the jazz side of things than the funk side of things. But he does this with another album too. There's one album that is purely instrumental, and the other album has vocals on it.
Is that the Sword and Stone and Words and Tones?
Sword and Stone, yep. So Sword and Stone is the same way.
I know what I'm listening to tomorrow.
So just to kind of give you kind of a direction on what to listen to. So A Show of Hands, I think, was his first album that came out in 95. Yes, 95 it came out. He re-released it in 2016. So that was his first one. That is just his thumping and just crazy technique.
That's not on Apple Music.
It's not, really.
The only one that I have on Apple I don't have Show of Hands on Apple Music. I don't even have...
You have A Show of Hands 15?
They don't. And that's upsetting. Oh, there's his... And he also had... Go ahead, continue. I'm sorry.
So then there's What Did He Say came out next, which is more funk kind of stuff. And then Soul Circus... No, Yin Yang came out after that. That's the more jazzy album. Soul Circus goes back to the funk stuff. Sword and Stone is where he starts to get into the... kind of more. Oh, I'm sorry. Palm Mystery came out before that, before Sword and Stone, which is a very funky album.
Palm Mystery is a great album.
Yeah. And then Sword and Stone is very philosophical, similar to Yin Yang in meaning and philosophy. Like there's a song called "Listen and Be Silent" where he talks about how the fact that listen and silent have the same letters in it. So how can you listen if you're not silent?
Right.
Things like that. He points out things like that. And then his most recent album is an album called Tripnotics, and that was the one that Cupid's on. Very funk driven on that one too. So you have a really wide range of stuff to listen to.
And then he does. So I found Show of Hands for some reason in Apple Music. It's considered a compilation album.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why. And then his 2001 album, Live in America.
Oh, I forgot about Live in America.
So good.
What a good album that is.
Listen to that. If you want to listen to anything, listen to that.
I think that's the one to listen to.
Yeah.
And if you like that, then branch out to the other stuff.
Yeah. And then he's, they put him on different, what other albums he has been on, which is funny because they don't connect him to Bela Fleck and the Flecktones.
Really?
On Apple Music, they don't.
Huh. And that's really where he kind of made his name.
They mention Bellefleck and the Flecktones, but like appears on, they don't put anything unless, I don't know. I have to look. But, yeah.
And another good one, I forgot about the music lesson soundtrack. That's a good one too.
That's up here too. The soundtrack. Yeah, I was just saying the soundtrack itself is just well done. They're not crazy long songs because they're, you know, like they're transitional songs or whatever, but just the quickness and the it won 5 Grammys. It won 5 Grammys in 2011. See, I can't speak 2011. So,
good old Victor.
And I would take him on. We talk about teachers. So even though I'm going to say me, I'm this is my opinion. You may agree or disagree. Even though I've never personally met him like Kyle has, and I've never personally taken a lesson from him in any way, shape, or form. He's still a teacher.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's something that is huge and we need to be aware of. So you're going to have those teachers that impact you in your life because they're right there in front of you. And then you're going to have those teachers that you may never meet ever in person or ever work with them on a musical level because we're talking about music, but they're still going to impact you. Like
and there are YouTube videos where he talks about like music theory.
Right.
And like my music theory is pretty good. And when I heard him explain stuff, I was like, oh wow, I didn't think about it that way. You know, so like he talks about like key signatures. So I'm gonna get a little bit technical for a minute. So like the key of A, right, has 3 sharps, right? The key of A flat has 4 flats. It always adds up to 7. And I was like, whoa. Because I never thought of it that way. And then he said, in the A major scale, there is no note that is the same as the A flat major scale. Like, duh. Like, of course that makes sense because it's the yin yang of scales.
Right.
So A and A flat, different, completely different.
Right.
They're the opposite of each other. And I never thought of it that way. And I started explaining the way he explains that to my students. And, you know, it changed the way they understood theory.
And that's exactly what he spoke about when he spoke in the keynote. As simple as the circle of fifths or a breakdown of that. But when I listened to him, like, and it's basic theory. It's just, he was talking basic theory. And when we say basic theory, stuff that anybody can learn, it's not anything that, you know, and I'm sitting here going, what? Just like you did. I'll be
this stuff
I've known this for how long?
Like, and he just like in 30 seconds blew my mind of like, and it's stuff that I guess I probably knew, but I never thought about it in that way. And it made it so much easier for my students to understand.
Because he teaches you to release your thought process and approach it completely different. And that's the thing is just, you know, be thankful, listen to everyone you can think of that can influence you. So you may not be influenced by Victor Wooten, but you may be by somebody else.
Yeah.
And all that amazing stuff. This night, I don't know what else to say because I could go on. If we keep talking about him, it'll be another 2 hours of this. Yep. So
why don't we just close that? We'll use "Miss You Okay" as a
any song you choose will make me a happy camper. If you haven't guessed, Kyle does most of the editing, so he gets to choose the ending song. I think he's been doing a pretty good job with the ones that you've ended with. I like them.
Oh, thanks.
No, hey, good editing song. You know, can't break the flow.
I think I need to listen to "Miss You" before I go to bed.
Yeah, I agree. And we're not going to tell you what's coming up because we don't know. Well, it's we don't know, and
we haven't planned that far because we're like we said we're 7 weeks ahead at this point. So
and we're having fun, so we don't want to like lock us into something and then change it up. So we're gonna have some more interviews coming up. We're just not sure when and how they're gonna fit in. and we're just gonna have some more fun with this. So this was this was fun, and I look forward to talking about Victor Wooten again.
Yep, me too.
Yeah, we got to plan that out. So, you got the closing, or do I have the closing?
You got the closing. I don't have it.
All right. So, to change up things a little bit.
Oh boy.
No, nothing crazy. We have a few people that have reached out to us and interacted with us and have given us some feedback, and we just want to give a quick shout out to a few people. We'd like to give a shout out to Carmen, a shout out to Charlotte, and a shout out to Jimmy for being a few of our weekly state listeners. So they are stateside. We thank you. We thank you for listening to us, having us in your ears weekly, and sharing what comes out of it. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. And to kind of piggyback on what we've been talking about most of the night, thank you to all of our teachers. Whether we mentioned you or not, whether you're one of our teachers or one of just a teacher listening in general, thank you for what you do, and keep it up.
Yeah, thank you so much. And please, if you're listening to us and you were one of our teachers, reach out to us. Yeah.
Yep, we'd love to talk to you.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. This was fantastic, and I'm looking forward to moving to the next episode and once we figure out what we're doing.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to Turn On the Music, the podcast. We hope that you join us next week. Follow us on Twitter at Turn On the Music and on Instagram at Turn On the Music Podcast. If you like what you heard, share it with a friend. And if you really want to help us out or help us promote the show, head over to Apple Podcast or the podcast service of your choice and give us a 5-star rating. Remember, always share the music. Have a good evening, Kyle.
You too, sir. See ya.